Welcome to Unmasked, the CEO Files, our Strata podcast, and I have a fantastic guest today. It's a great day to talk about business, growing a business, exiting a business, and I think living a joyful life. When you find out where this guy lives, you'll know. My new friend and fellow YPO, five-time author with a sixth book coming out called The Founder's Creed. Welcome to Patrick Sweeney.
Alan, thank you so much for being here, and thank the listeners for taking the time to tune in and hear our talk.
So first thing is you're coming to us from Chamonix, France.
I am most
What
beautiful
took
place
you?
in the world.
That's what I was gonna say. You
Yeah.
took it right out of my mouth. What drew you to Chamonix?
I came here. One of our clients was Airbus, and I was in France, and then we were doing things with Malpensa Airport. This is in one of my prior tech companies, and I had a weekend in between France and Italy, and I thought, well, what could I do? I've seen Chamonix in all these ski movies, and it was ski season, and I went and I skied this legendary off-piste thing called the Vallée Blanche. Hired a guide, skied it, and was but just in complete awe, Alan. My mind
Really?
was blown away by how insignificant I felt skiing across all these glaciers with these massive mountains surrounding me, and it was very spiritual for me, and I loved the place. And then came back that summer because I thought, oh, this place can't be that good in the summer. And there's rock climbing and mountain biking and paragliding, and I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. And so when my wife and I had three kids, and I didn't get to Europe till I was older, and for a lot of reasons, but I said, let's give our kids a European experience, and let's bring them to Chamonix for 6 months. And we had this horse farm in Virginia, right? We had
Okay.
a lot of land, a lot of horses, chickens, rabbits, dogs, you name it. And my wife said, no, the kids are starting school and our parents are getting older. And I said, honey, let's just pack the shit up. 6 months, we're going over there, we're having an experience. And so we did. And we were here about 3 months, and she said, why would we ever leave?
Wow.
Because it was just so incredible. So I do the back and forth. I generally do 2 weeks in Boston and try and get 3 or 4 weeks in Chamonix.
Well, I'll have to get Chamonix in the list because after I saw you were there, I went and looked it up online and I went, this is a postcard. Like this is just
Every
so it's
day.
exciting. That's really cool. Before we get started, I wanted to read something that kind of right from your LinkedIn, which I think sets up our conversation well. And so the note you have is, as a VC, your greatest challenge isn't finding great ideas, it's scaling them. Many promising portfolio companies fail not from a bad product, but from a broken operational structure. And if they can't handle hypergrowth once they find product market excuse me, try that again, product market fit. That's hard to say, by the way,
It
clearly.
is. It's better writing it than reading it.
Clearly, but it's the new year, and who knows where my brain is.
Yeah.
And you have something you call the BOODA Doctrine, which we'll discuss today. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to learn a lot because maybe you could help me grow my business too, which is exciting. So it's really
Yeah.
cool. But in
Absolutely.
YPO fashion, I'd like to start with an icebreaker.
Hmm.
If you must know me, you must know this.
If you must know me, you must know I was the poster child for Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Oh,
Until I was about 35 years old. I was petrified of everything, mostly flying.
wow.
Flying was the biggest thing. I had this tremendous fear. I saw a plane crash on TV when I was 6 years old. That
Hmm.
planted this seed of fear that just grew into a whole tree. And
Wow.
so until I was 35 and had a very near death experience, I was as wimpy a kid as you could possibly imagine, and just afraid of everything from talking to girls to jumping off a cliff and into the swimming hole. And so I think that's probably the thing to know about me, and that near death experience
Hmm.
turned me into Captain Courageous. And I know you know this, Alan, that I paraglide and I mountain climb and I ski and I fly stunt planes and all this other stuff. So
Wow.
that's a something that most people meet me today would not have suspected.
Um, I wasn't expecting to go down this road, but boy, what a great lesson. Can you share, if you're open to sharing, the near-death experience, and then And then I want to talk about fear because fear holds a lot of people back. So can you
Yeah.
share, it seems like a catalyst moment in your life. So maybe share the moment and how
It
you
was an
overcame it.
incredible experience, and took a lot of time to distill and absorb. And then when I did, that became the genesis for my first book, which was number 5 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And so the reason being, I think, is the question you're asking. A lot of people want to know the answer to.
Yeah.
And for me, because I had all this fear, Alan, I didn't know. I constantly had this fear cocktail going through my body. So my amygdala, which is the fear center of your
Yeah.
brain,
Yeah.
your amygdala is running a 2 million-year-old piece of software, right?
Yeah.
We're programmed 2 million years ago
Yeah.
to fight, flight, or freeze. Any one of those three choices, as long as we can procreate and get our genes passed on to the next generation. That's the only thing we
Mhm.
care about. We don't
Yeah.
care about being happy, buying a Ferrari, starting a business. None of that works with the amygdala. It's just survival. And so my amygdala was constantly activated because I was so scared of everything. And I had a
Huh.
abusive upbringing and
I
very
see.
blue collar, first generation Irish immigrant family. And so I had this fear and shame all growing up. And one of the things I thought first was, if I became a great athlete, I'll find courage. So
Mm.
I ended up spending 6 years training for the Olympics in sport of rowing. It was second in the Olympic trials in the single scull, one man, and raced the World Cup for 3 years, and
It's great.
and was very courageous on the water. Once we got off the water, I felt like I was living this imposter syndrome my whole life.
Oh.
And so I said, okay, after the Olympics, I'm going to start a business, and my goal is 40 by 40. If I make myself a net worth of $40 million by the time I'm 40 years old, I'll be courageous. I'll be strong.
Hmm.
I'll be the man.
Interesting.
And so as I was, when I got out of business school, I was working. So because business school, they always accept one dumb jock and one Navy SEAL, right? And so I got the dumb jock entry into a really good business school. And so after that, I said I'm going to start a business. I started in the data center space, started my first business, made a ton of every mistake you could possibly make in as a first time CEO who raised a lot of venture capital. Then thought, okay, I'll try it again. This way, it's going to be different. And I was still had all this fear that I was just going to be a complete failure.
Hmm.
So the way I dealt with the fear, because I didn't know what it was, I could feel the cortisol, just coursing through my body, and the adrenaline and the DHEA and all this stuff that your body produces
Yeah.
when your amygdala is activated. And I didn't know how to deal with it except for drinking. So
Hmm.
I literally I had an open office plan, so I've never believed in offices, which just every company I built, it's just desks on the floor. And it's a nod to a company I first worked for called Trammell Crow, largest real estate company in the world. And they no one had an office, even the billionaire CEO.
Got
So
it.
I've loved that. And right next to my desk, I had a little dorm room fridge that my assistant would keep stocked with Guinness all the
Good
time.
Irishman. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so usually 5 or 6 o'clock, I'd pop a couple Guinness. Some of the guys would come over, we'd talk about the day or whatever. And then, 7 or 8 o'clock, I'd go out to a venture capital event, or a tech event, or some charity event or whatever. And I'd get home, and I'd have during the night, through the night, through the day and the night, probably 8 to
Yeah.
10 beers or eight to
Yeah.
10 drinks, depending. And this was every night. And
Hmm.
then I felt so bad about it. I get home at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd wake up at 5, because I had that whole guilt thing, the Irish Catholic guilt going on, that
Wow.
I'd have to go sweat it out in the gym.
Got it.
So I'd go to the gym every morning. Then I'd get to the office, and I'd be so tired that I started pounding Diet Cokes. I'd have 4 or 5 Diet Cokes a day just to keep me going to the level I needed to be until I could get to the Guinness. And this is going on for a couple of years
Wow.
as I was building Odin, and 4 hours of sleep a night, 8 to 10 drinks a day, and just really feeling terrible. And I got to the gym. I got to Gold's Gym right next to our office in Ashburn, Virginia, one morning, and started doing pull-ups. And it just got this real sharp pain going down my forearm. And I thought, well, that's strange. I must have pulled a muscle. I'll just go do some cardio. And next day, I woke up and my whole arm, up to just above my elbow was bright red, and I felt terrible. I could barely wake up, and I should have gone to the doctor then, but I didn't. You know why, right?
You're a guy.
Now we got, it was fear. I was full of fear, and I thought,
Yeah.
well, what if the doctor tells me something bad? So
Yeah.
the third day, I couldn't even get out of bed, and I had a
Oof.
fever and everything else. I went to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, it looks like a staph infection." And what I'm going to do is I'm going to prescribe some antibiotics. We'll take a blood test, and the nurse will call you back this afternoon. So the nurse didn't call me back. The doctor did. And that was one phone call that changed my life because he said, your blood test came back. You have no white blood cells. You have no immune system. We don't know why, but come into the hospital. We want to run some more tests. Go into the Reston hospital. They run some more tests, and they say, "Look, we can't figure this out. We're going to send you to the best hospital in the world. A couple hours north, Johns Hopkins, and they'll figure it out for sure." So I go up to Johns Hopkins. My 1 year old daughter went to her grandparents. My wife comes up to Hopkins with me, and they go through a bunch of tests, and I've got more wires and tubes plugged in me than I know what to do with. And the doctor comes in, and he sits down and he says, "Look, we aren't sure what's going on, but it's some kind of leukemia, and we're going to try this very aggressive treatment. But if it doesn't work, you've probably got about 2 weeks left to live. So we think you should get your affairs in order, and you should say your goodbyes."
How old are you now at this point?
It's about 35.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And yeah, so it's 20, 22, 21, 22 years ago. And the only feeling I had then, Alan, was regret. And my wife, so we had a 1 year old daughter. My wife was 6 months pregnant. I didn't mention that, did I?
Oh,
She's sitting at the end of the bed, listening to this doctor. And so I felt nothing but regret because I was so afraid my whole life. I was afraid of flying. I was afraid
yeah.
of, imposter syndrome. I was afraid of all this stuff from how I grew up that I just thought, wow, I wasted so many incredible opportunities that this is, now I'm going to die. And all of that fear was for nothing.
Okay.
And I said to my wife, I said, look, if I live, I get out of here, I'm going to get over this fear of flying.
Hmm.
And my daughter, Shannon, deserves the kind of dad who's brave enough and got a set of balls big enough to get on a plane and take her to Disneyland or take her to Ireland to meet her family or take her to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower. So that was my
Wow.
motivation, not to give away the ending, Alan. I lived.
Yes, clearly. Oh my God, though.
And then that's when everything changed. So when I got out, it took a while for my immune system to build back up after chemo and stuff. But as soon as I could, I went down to the Leesburg airport and I signed up for flying lessons. And the first lesson I had to pee like 4 or 5 times before I got to the airplane, right? Because I was so scared. The second one, we went over the Blue Ridge Mountains in this little two-seater, and we hit some turbulence, and I actually think I pooped myself. I mean, just a little, not like a lot, but but
Patrick, we like imagery on podcasts, but not
yes,
quite that. But
that
keep
is
going.
that. Yeah, new pair of shorts that day. But the amazing thing, and this is what led to the book, Fear is Fuel, the
Curious feel, yeah.
eighth or 10th lesson that I took, I realized this was the most fun I'd ever had in my life. It was the most fulfilling challenge, and it was absolutely incredible. I fell in love with flying, something that I've been terrified with for 35 years. Man, I got my private pilot's license. I got my instrument rating. I got my seaplane rating. I got my commercial rating. And now I fly stunt planes and paragliders and anything with a wing. And
Wow.
the reason I wrote that book is, it's for everyone, not just business owners, but the reason I wrote that book is I learned that all of your dreams are on the other side of
That's
fear.
fear.
So we need some tools to know how to get over that fear or get through that fear or get around that fear to get to our dreams. And so I interviewed 35 neuroscientists around the world and took 6 years to write that book. And it's changed a lot of lives.
You know, I didn't expect to go down this road, but we're called Unmasked for a reason, and this is brilliant because, in our world, we talk to CEOs every single day, and fear is sitting below the surface on almost every conversation we have. It
Yeah.
gets manifested in different things. Oh, I'm uncomfortable here, or I'm uncomfortable there, but it usually many times is fuel, as you suggested, it's fuel. But if you had advice for a CEO today who's feeling fear about any aspect of their lives, it could be personal or professional, what would you say to them?
So I think and I've done events for I think close to 50 YPO chapters now. Um, and I would say, first of all, they need to know that probably 90%, maybe higher, of CEOs that I've met and dealt with have had some form of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
at one time or another. It's an incredibly common fear within YPOers. But when
Yep.
you have it, you think you're the only one who has it,
Yeah.
right? And you think, oh man, look at all these other guys are so successful, and they put it, and it's not true. Every one of us has had it at one time or another.
100%.
And I think the other key and in the Founders Creed, the book coming out in March, one of the things I introduce is this BOODA Doctrine, and it's based on an air-to-air combat strategy by this guy named John Boyd, who created the OODA loop, and it's OODA. But there's a component missing to it to really make it concrete, and that's the B that I add to it to make it the BOODA loop. Then that B is belief or conviction. And people in business who are having trouble getting most businesses don't fail because they've got the wrong product market fit, like you said, or because they don't have the most talented people or the best funding. Most of them end up failing because they don't have a collective conviction or belief that's pointing everyone in the same direction. So I would say one of the things that belief counters is uncertainty.
Mm.
So we produce this thing called free energy when we can't predict the future. So our brain's a prediction engine. We go through our whole day, 80% of our decisions are made subconsciously because our brain's predicting what's going to happen. We go into a room, we flip on a light switch, we expect 95 chance the light's going to go on, 5% chance it's not going to go on. And then we predict if it doesn't go on, it's going to be because the light's burnt out. That's probably 80% chance and 20% chance the circuit breaker is broken. So we go through our day predicting the future. When we can't predict the future, that's uncertainty, right? And that's where every founder who's changed the world lives happily. But you
Mm.
have to have the belief in that uncertainty to convince internal people to join you
Yeah.
and external people as well, because you've got this vision of where the world can be. And let's use Elon as an example. His vision was we can have a super cool, super fast electric car that goes 200 miles and we can do it for $35,000.
Yeah.
The rest of the world said, "You're crazy. GM did a hybrid, Toyota did the Prius, right? You're nuts. There's no way we can do it." So here's the founder with this belief and all this uncertainty, right? And that's fear, right?
Yeah.
Uncertainty always comes as fear. And some founders will say, okay, well, first we'll do a hybrid, and then we'll do a self-charging thing, and then we'll do and great founders say, no, I have a vision of where the world can be 10 years, 5 years from now. And the distance between where that founder's vision is and where the rest of the world is, that's what I call the belief gap. And
Got
if
it.
you get across that belief gap, you've got to have internal people that have the same conviction and focus that you have, and you have to have external people as well, right? So customers and analysts and press
Mhm.
and everything else. And that's I'd say that's kind of the key from a business perspective and framing how to use fear is that fuel for success.
Brilliant, because the unfortunate reality is many people don't even get past the fear. As your amygdala said, you're so well, they just kind of flight, right? They say, okay, I'm just going to move out 'cause it's easier to run away than it is to fight, isn't it?
Alan, I'll give you one quick example. of a YPO or a former forum mate of mine. I've been in five forums, so they probably won't
Oh,
figure out who it is. But brilliant guy, one of the smartest guys I know, super successful. And he wrote a book, and he came up with this concept that was, it was really innovative and really interesting. Wrote a book at the same time I started Fear is Fuel, and uh, had a professional ghostwriter, hired a professional ghostwriter, someone at YPO recommended, and had an iteration of the book, and then said, okay, I really didn't like the job he did. I'm going to hire this woman that had 10 bestsellers or whatever. So he hired this woman who charged him ridiculous, like 75,000 or 80,000, something like that, to
yeah.
rewrite it. Rewrote it, and he said, I'm not really quite happy. I'm going to work it a little bit more. This is 2000. This is probably 2018, 2016, maybe
Wow.
2018, somewhere in there, and he still hasn't published the book. And 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 I think he's got a moral obligation to publish it because he learned so much and he has such great ideas,
Yeah.
but it's his fear that's holding him back from publishing it. He's afraid it's going to be a failure and people joke about him, people laugh at him and say what was he doing writing a book? What's he think he knows? And it's just fear that's
Wow.
keeping this genius from the world. Like if he could just frame it that I'm going to help one person or I'm going to help a million people, then it's a whole different outcome.
I hate to want to pivot, but I do want to get some of your business experience, although you have kind of set the table with the word belief.
Mm.
That without belief, nothing else matters, right? Is that
Yeah.
a fair statement? Do you believe that very clearly?
100%. So that belief comes before you can take any action, or else you're not going to take the right action. And this Buddha doctrine that I introduced in the Founders Creed, it takes the most effective war fighting doctrine for air-to-air combat and maneuver
Hmm.
warfare and guerrilla warfare, and it turns it into a business tool. And it
Interesting.
turns it into something that can help founders create a company that scales at hypergrowth. So if you want to create a unicorn, you need this kind of structure in place, and that's what I was referring to in the LinkedIn post that you mentioned.
I will be looking that up and learning. I want to learn from that because that's really exciting. So let's just go pivot a little bit to you've built five tech companies, you exited three, and you've invested in over 60.
Hmm. Yes.
Uh, yeah, I don't know if I have over 60 in my portfolio. So, but if you look
I'm
back
not
now,
saying that's a smart thing to do, Alan. Trust me.
I listen, dude, I am a big believer in feel the fear and do it anyways. Like
Yeah,
that's how I live my life, and sometimes I get the shit kicked out of me, but I don't care because there's always fun on the other side of fear, as you said so
that's it.
beautifully. But when you look back, the businesses that you operated, that you exited and you invested in, is there a pattern you see outside of belief that founders use to be successful, or things that sabotage them to hurt them? What would be your counsel there?
Yeah, so a couple things, and one that's critical, I think, is if you're going to create a company in hypergrowth, right? Some people there's a big difference between a lifestyle business, maybe
Hmm.
a 10, $20 million company that's making 10% EBITDA a year or something like that,
Yeah,
versus a unicorn,
got it.
right? And one of the key statistical differences is 80% of unicorns have multiple founders.
I see.
So if you want to build something big, find yourself a super smart guy. And I did this with my first company. So I had this great idea. I built 6 million square feet of data centers for Trammell Crow, or as part of our this high tech group we were part
Hmm.
of. And I came up with the idea of creating the cloud.
Okay. Oh
Excuse me.
wow.
So I said, people don't need servers, they don't need cages, they don't need racks, they just need compute power. So Server Vault was the first company I created.
Hmm.
I had all the tech understanding from the data center space. I didn't from the network and security space. And then I really didn't from the sort of business administrative kind of space. And I ended up meeting a potential investor who was the CE or the CFO of the largest credit card company in the world, of Capital One. So he
Hmm.
took them public, took them from, whatever it was, a $300 million IPO to a $3 billion value or something. He's just crazy successful. And he was definitely my Yoda,
Oh,
and
cool.
I'd go through, I was the front man. I was excited about the cloud. I was explaining it to everybody. And, he'd come back and tell me, we can't do this, you can't do that. Here's where you have to spend your money. And he was amazing, right? So having him as a co-founder, and then having a focus on the culture is
Hmm.
something that I think every company that scales really big has both the idea of having a cultural measurement
Hmm.
or a cultural metric that's
Hmm.
really important to them. And then if you have another co-founder, it really allows you to do things that are much better. And particularly if you're complementary. If you have the same views, like if I wanted to sell, build a company and flip it in a year,
Yeah.
and Jim, my CFO, wanted to build a company that lasted for 100 years, we're not going to work,
Work. Yeah.
right? Even though I've got all this tech acumen and everything else, he's got all this business skill, we wouldn't work. So we have to
Yeah.
be aligned on our values and our beliefs, right? We,
Yeah.
we have to believe the same thing. And then the other thing we have to do is bring people across that belief gap with us. So how do we convince them? And one of the things that I learned at ServerVault, and this is one of the cornerstones of the Founders Creed, is we had five brilliant people. So we had a CFO, Jimbo. We had our CTO who redid the architecture of the Pentagon after they got hacked.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
JB, John Broom. We had Mark Laudenslater, who was our COO, who was just a brilliant guy as well. And we had Sue Rabeau, who was this wonderful chief revenue officer for us. So we had this brilliant team, and we all used the same words, like, securing the internet was our mission, and we were going to put our data in the ether. So I wasn't smart enough to call it the cloud,
Cloud.
but
Yeah.
damn it, Bezos came up with that like 4 years later. And so we had this thing, and we were all using the same language of most innovative, most secure. But when I looked at the belief that we each had, I came up with this realization that we are all thinking of different things, right? Lottie, our COO, he wanted this. He wanted to be able to provision servers quickly, put them up, and scale. Like I want to do 100 servers a day. I want to check, the ports and the configuration twice a day. And so he was like building a factory. Sue was like, "Oh, I want to make customers happy. They're going to need
Yeah.
this custom design. They're going to need this extra thing." So she's thinking using the same words that, securing the internet needs doing this. And then JB, our CTO, said, "Okay, no, we're going to slow down speed. Speed doesn't matter. What matters is security. We're going to build this, super firewalled, impossible to hack into, incredible thing, but maybe the performance won't be that great, or scalability won't be that great, and maybe it'll take us longer to build, but it's going
Hmm.
to be as fucking secure as you can make stuff." And so we had this illusion of agreement, right? So we all agreed on everything. I thought we were agreeing on it, but we were all agreeing on different things.
Got it.
And so the big part of the book that I've used in a lot of these startups, and I'm an operating partner at a couple of venture capital firms in Europe, working with a handful of their companies in each portfolio, and I always do something called a shared belief map, and that's really getting everyone together on the executive team and deciding what you believe the core principles of your business are and what doesn't change, and then what are hypotheses that you actually have to go out and prove. And when you sit in a room, Alan, with five brilliant people, and you say,
Hmm.
"Okay, tell me the core principles that we would bet the company on. These are non-negotiable. There's no doubt." You get 10 different answers. And if you say, "Okay, what are the hypotheses we have to prove?" you get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is get everyone together to where you have three or four core principles and maybe five or six hypotheses you're trying to prove every week. And you do that through the BOODA cycle. And the quicker you go through those loops, that cycle, the bigger advantage you're going to have over your competitors.
And how do these founders, we'll call the five of you, five, six of you, Are they accepting of that philosophy? Like, do you have to teach them that, or do they get it when they're in the room?
No, no, no. It's funny. So one of the examples I use in the Founders Creed, I've got five or six examples. One is a company I worked with through one of the portfolios am partnered with, and the venture capitalist and the CTO really wanted to do that. They heard me talk at the CEO retreat, and they said, "Oh, I want to bring him in for that workshop." And the CEO came along reluctantly.
Oh, there you
He's
go.
kind of yeah, he kind of said, he was one of the three founders, and he was the founder really, because he it was his idea, and he got the two guys. And he said, I've got everything under control. He was just like me at Serverwell, right, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I could see it, right? And he's like, no, I understand this shit. We're all in agreement. I got this under control. And the VC, the lead VC said, give Sweeney a chance, and your CTO really wants him to come in. And so, which I love, right? Because what happened was a month later, he calls me up and he said, "Hey, let's get some time on the books. I want to go through a few things from the meeting." And he started out our meeting and he said, "Listen, I got to tell you, I was really reluctant
Yeah.
to get going into this, but it has changed dramatically how we operate, and just
Wow.
taken what was a lot of chaos and putting out fires and everything else. It's taken chaos and we've turned it into our cadence. So
Wow.
now we're going through these Buddha loops faster, and it's not a reaction to something that's happened. It's not a fire to put out. It's because we know the faster we get through these loops, the more competitive we're going to be. And they just won a $700,000 deal. They do like telemedicine, remote
Yeah.
patient monitoring,
Yeah.
telemedicine. They just won a $700,000 deal from Italy's largest hospital. They
Wow.
got a grant for $300,000 from the Italian health fund. And they're scaling up to be a unicorn, and they've got these structures in place, the shared belief map, the decision-making principles, all the different things, the single-threaded owner that Amazon came up with, and they're
Nice.
just killing it. And so that's people are reluctant at first, or some founders are reluctant because they were like me. They think, okay, I've got agreement, I've got belief. They probably didn't even recognize that belief was a thing or is a thing. But you definitely, once your eyes are open to it, you can't not see it.
I have, before we wrap up, I have two questions for you. One is around leadership as general. Since you've invested in 60 businesses and you've obviously operated and you understand and you talk to hundreds of people in leadership, how do you think we are in the state of leadership right now in business? Just generally your thoughts.
I think there's a big shift going on in business that's probably generational, Alan, because I'm seeing younger companies who, one, have a belief that they can become unicorns, and that they aren't building a company, they're creating a movement, right? I think that's a big
Big one.
leadership shift.
Yeah, I like that.
And the second thing that's really surprising and difficult for me is I'm seeing founders incredibly fast to delegate.
Hmm.
Right. So when I was building my companies, I wanted to do everything. I wanted my fingers in every pot. I wanted approval of this marketing campaign. I wanted to have the last interview with this hire. And now I'm seeing guys. I was up at EPFL a month ago. EPFL is like the MIT of Switzerland.
Okay. Thank
Super
you for
smart
clarifying.
guys. Great technology licensing program so people can start companies, their own internal incubator. It's really innovative, and a lot of good investments have come out of there. A couple of unicorns recently,
Got it.
and it was clear that the people doing the pitches, I talked to them afterwards, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know how that turned out. I gave it to him to do. I don't know how that turned out. She's,
Got it.
she's working on that. We'll find out at the end of the month."
Hmm.
And I was really surprised that the leadership by delegation for the probably the most recent, generation of founders, 25-year-old, 26 year
Yeah.
olds, that's the big difference. But I
Hmm.
think, the other things that are, I would say, are constants would be leadership from a servant perspective, leading from the front. I think
Hmm.
that never, if you're not willing to do something, how can you ask anyone else in your company
Yeah,
to do it, right?
100%.
And then I think also architecting the cadence, creating that speed when there's no fire to put out, that's critical. And then one of the things I mentioned in the book is Yvon Chouinard, who had such incredible conviction and belief. He's the founder of Patagonia.
Yes. Okay.
And he created this incredible company that's mission was to help the planet, right? It wasn't to make beautiful clothes or anything like that. It was to help the planet. And then, I don't know, 4 years ago, he gave away the company to the planet, right? He set up a bunch of trusts that says, this money will go to Patagonia as long as it needs to run it. If there's any excess, it's going to this charity, this charity, this charity.
Mm.
And he basically gave his whole company as his legacy to the
Wow.
planet, which I think is incredible leadership, right?
That is
Because he
incredible
got
leadership.
such belief and conviction in what he was doing.
Well, I love when you talked about from chaos to cadence. That's such a beautiful way to think about because there's a lot of companies that we work with that to use your example of the CEO, they think they've got it all under control when that's such a false premise. You
Yeah, yeah,
can't control, especially if you're trying to grow a uniform and a unicorn, not uniform.
yeah.
But chaos sometimes that's a lot of people managed by chaos, and that's not a fun way to work, is it?
No, it's not. It's not a fun way to work, and it's just not scalable, right?
Yeah,
If you've got a 500,000 person company and you're still running by putting out fires,
yeah,
your ego's too big, right?
yeah.
Because you think you have to be at the center of everything, and I mean, I think there's sometimes you have to lead by example, and that's what I would call kinetic leadership,
Hmm.
right? There's a great story, Elon Musk found out went through the factory one day and they're way behind on the Model S or whatever and he decides that the best way to overcome this is to put up a tent in the parking lot and do another production line outside in the parking lot in Fremont, California, next to the Tesla factory because they don't have capacity. And so he dives underneath these robotic machinery and starts putting things together, and people are there for this crazy push. And everyone in Silicon Valley is like, what the hell is it like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey going on in the Tesla parking lot because these tents are going up, and that was kinetic leadership, right? There
Yeah.
was there was an emergency. He had to push it out. The rest of the time in his business and in dozens of other businesses, if you look at another great YPO company that I've invested in called Virta Health, which is Sami Inkinen. Sami created Trulia that he sold for $3 billion to Zillow.
Hmm.
And now he's got a $2 or $3 billion valuation with Virta, which is eliminating diabetes, type 2 diabetes, so getting rid of insulin and everything else. But what leaders like Sami do is architectural leadership. So he doesn't have fires to put out every day, but he wants that cadence to be
Yeah.
continually as fast as possible to keep their competitive advantage. And when you architect that kind of cadence, there's a leadership and a operational hygiene, right? There,
Hmm.
there's no waste, there's no dirt, there's no stopping to clean out the gears. It's things go so smoothly and so quickly that competitors can't touch them, and that's how these companies become unicorns.
Interesting. Last question for you is talk to me about your YPO experience and how it ties to leadership.
So my YPO experience, I think, is firmly rooted in the old adage that you're the average of the five people you hang around with, right?
Mm.
Or the
Yeah.
average of the people you spend most of your time with. And so being part of YPO has given me access to just absolutely incredible people to learn from, to emulate, to ask for advice, and it's everything from personal stuff to business stuff to parenting things. And so my YPO experience has been all about the people that I've gotten to interact with, and I've had a lot of leadership positions from the sports and entertainment industry network to membership chairs to sponsors of different events and champions of the Bitcoin conference and everything else. So it's been a very fulfilling experience. And one of the things I say to all the portfolio companies, once they hit the requirements, I said you got to join, and
Yeah.
that's part of me helping you out is that you join YPO and you get in a forum.
I love it. It's life-changing stuff for sure. When's the book
100%.
coming? When's the book coming out officially?
Founders Creed comes out March 1st. Pre-order will be January 15th. Pre-order starts
Okay.
then. And if you pre-order, you get a 30% discount.
Okay.
And there's also a bulk discount for YPOers who want to, get it to their management team and that sort of thing as well.
So send me the link for the pre-order. We'll make sure that's in the show notes.
You bet.
It'll be just around the time we'll launch it somewhere around that time as well. So that'll be an opportunity for people to see your wisdom in one of the books that you have. So that's great. As we wrap up, is there any one last message you have for people listening based on your life and your experience?
Ellen, I'd say, first of all, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen. If you're still with us and you haven't started doom scrolling or doing something else, then I really appreciate it. I hope you took something away from this time. And I'd say the thing to remember is that all your dreams are on the other side of fear. So when you feel that fear every day, then that means you've got an opportunity, right? There's only two ways we make decisions in life. We either make them out of fear or we make them out of opportunity. So when you feel that fear, ask yourself what the opportunity is and then lean into that.
That's the perfect way to end this podcast, my friend. Thank you so much. We will look forward to launching this in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be exciting. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Alan.